People, for example, my daughter, son-in-law, and my 3 grandkids just decided to move from Seattle to Sun Valley themselves, trying to figure out how to make a life there. So I think that's an exciting time to see this building. I've been involved, I started my career as a computer science professor at Rutgers University a million years ago. Did my PhD work in Wisconsin, in Wisconsin here. Yay!
All right.
And then spent the last 35 years working in 4 different innovation ecosystems. Each is different in its own way. Spent 11 years in Portland, Oregon, working for Tektronix back in the good old days of Tektronix, I call them. And tech became a magnet for spinning companies out. And so there were Mentor Graphics and TriQuint, and a lot of companies spun out of tech as kind of the granddaddy of the Portland area, and built a pretty healthy ecosystem. Then tech went down, that began to go down, now it's building back up again. Tech in Portland is becoming a very interesting entrepreneurial hub now. Then spent 10 years in Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley, everybody wants to be like Silicon Valley, and I always say, no, you can't be, that's unique. But there was Stanford, HP, we all know the Silicon Valley story, which I won't repeat. Then spent 5 years down in La Jolla, living by the beach. And UCSD was the engine there. A lot of companies spun out of UCSD. And watching that whole thing develop down there was exciting. Then moved to Seattle because my daughter went to the University of Washington and began to have children. The lure of grandchildren. Some of you have gray hair.
Yes.
But you'll someday discover that the lure of grandchildren is overwhelming. So we moved to Seattle, to the rain, to be close to the first grandchild, and now we have 3 there. And now they followed us to Sun Valley, which is kind of fun. Seattle obviously has the University of Washington, has Microsoft with people leaving. So any place that has a great university or great companies where people begin to kind of spin out and try things, and all of a sudden you begin to get this ecosystem effect going. I don't know enough yet about Boise and kind of where that stands, but this looks pretty good to me. If all of you are involved in building startups and working on what's the next great big thing, while you're getting out and riding your bike in 10 minutes, then I think that bodes well for this area. So that's pretty exciting. So one of the reasons I'm here, and thanks to Pat for inviting me, is to talk about what's going on in Sun Valley, what's going on in Boise, are there some synergies there, can we use ourselves together, so we have this next meeting in Sun Valley, whatever it might be. Getting back to kind of the good old days, I thought, in fact, I actually made some notes of things that I might talk about, if I can remember them. The other topic I want to talk about is dealing with failure. Has anybody here ever tried to do something you really wanted to do and failed at it? All right, if you didn't raise your hand, you're either lying or you're really, really lucky. One of the things that an entrepreneur learns early on is that it's not just a straight shot to success. You may have read about some success stories where it really was just a rifle shot, but in almost all cases I'm aware of, there was lots of zigging and zagging, resets, as someone said before, where you tried something that didn't turn out to be quite right, you changed something, you tried something else, that didn't work, you failed, you learned something, and eventually you keep going and you get successful. So that's true in large companies, and I can tell you some stories about what I consider failures of Apple back in the old days, and it's certainly true of startups. So learning how to accept failure, one of the neat things about the culture in the US is we don't punish people for failure. Now maybe after your 5th or 6th or 7th or 8th failure you begin to get a stigma, but in general, trying something and going for it and failing is okay as long as you learn from it and kind of keep going. So that's good. Is this okay?
Yeah, perfect.
Feels loud to me. So a couple of stories about Apple. I was at Sun Microsystems, running their computer graphics and windowing systems and all that kind of stuff at Sun. And this guy named John Sculley came after me. It was in the early 90s. And I got into a tug of war between Scott McNeely and John Sculley, which was an interesting situation to be in. But I had always been a Mac fan. I had a Lisa, when the Lisa came out, I had early Macs. And so I decided to go to Apple. And I wound up running the research labs at Apple, what was called the Advanced Technology Group. which in the 90s was one of the world's great computer science research labs. I had all of the Apple fellows working for me. If you're a computer scientist, you know Alan Kay, you know Don Norman, you know, so those were Gary Startupboise, who had invented the laser printer at PARC. So we had some world-class people. And in my assessment, even though Steve Jobs and I disagreed on this, we were still building really, really good technology. So if you think about QuickTime, how many of Mac users here? Okay. So things like QuickTime, and we were the first ones to integrate speech recognition into the system. QuickTime VR, if you've ever seen things, real estate places where you can look around the room, you know, and move your camera angle, that was invented at Apple. In fact, one of my frustrations was we patented that technology. And after I left Apple, I saw some company called, I think it was iPix or something, that was licensing that to real estate firms. And I said, where did you get that technology from? You know, you're violating an Apple patent. Really? No one from Apple ever said anything. So we kept developing cool technology, but in the 90s, we were losing to Microsoft, to Windows 3.1, then to Windows 95 that had long file names. It was very frustrating as a technologist, and so one of the things I learned was that while technology is great, I assume many of you are technologists, having cool technology is great. If you don't get the business model right, if you don't get the marketing right, if you don't get all the other stuff right, it doesn't matter how good your technology is. And that was one of the things that was frustrating to me as the VP of technology at Apple. Tell you another story about how dumb I am. One of the things I had was university relations at Apple. So I used to fund universities to do good work. These were the good old days, right? Here's $300,000, do something good. And every year we had an open house at Infinite Loop 1, which was my building, where we had all the university fundees come in, set up tables, and present what they were doing for the Apple community. That was the value we got from it. And I remember 1993, and as the VP of technology, they would lead me around all the tables, and I'd see what Stanford's doing, and what Carnegie Mellon's doing, and what MIT's doing. And I had given money to an old college buddy of mine named Larry Smarr, who ran the National Center for Supercomputer Applications at Illinois. Larry, do good work. And in 1993, they presented the software, and they said, Dr. LaFaivre, today we're going to show you a new concept we're working on. We're calling it a browser. And this was the original Mosaic browser. And you know, we had invented HyperCard. If you're an old-time Apple person, you know HyperCard. And I was like, so hypertext, okay, that's cool. Next demo. And that was the Mosaic browser that broke open the internet. That's really what enabled the internet that we know today, getting to the visual interface and using hypertext, etc. So, you know, we missed on some technologies, we developed some technologies, but ultimately we failed at Apple in those days. Apple was in trouble in 1996, 97, when this little thing happened with Steve Jobs coming back. How many of you have read the Steve Jobs biography? All right, a few of you. It's a good book. You should read it. Let me tell you the real story, inside story of what happened. We knew that the Mac OS at the time was on its last legs, and my team was working on moving it over on top of a Unix kernel, basically. There was this guy named John Louis Gasset who founded a company called B. Anybody remember the B OS? Which was a very nice, modern, multitasking operating system. And myself and Lennon Hancock and the other executives decided to acquire B instead of Unix and move that under the Mac OS. And so we offered John Louis Gasset $200 million to sell us B, come back to Apple, and we would make that the modern OS. And he held off for more money. He decided that we had no other options, he held off for more money. And during this time, someone introduced Gil Amelio to Steve Jobs. Gil Amelio was the CEO at the time. And anyway, the end result of all this long story is we wound up buying Next, which if you're a computer scientist, we never used any of what was called Next Step. What we got was a mock kernel with BSD 4.3 Unix. That was That was what we acquired for $200 or $300 million, I think, for Steve. So Steve came back into the company, decided to push Gil Amelio out, decided to shut down the Advanced Technology Group, brought his guys over from Next, and that's when I wound up leaving Apple, to my everlasting shame, because I gave up options worth about $200 million. But that's another story. Pat, speaking of my wife that you mentioned earlier, but when it was all over, Ellen Hancock, who was the CTO at Apple that I reported to overall, we went off and had some wine and tried over our fine wine. And she said that she had met with Jean-Louis Doucet when this was all over. And that she said, Jean-Louis, you blew it. If you'd taken that $200 million offer, we'd be, using Beam, we'd be moving forward, blah, 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 blah. And he said that Jean-Louis is a Frenchman, my heritage. He said, Ellen, as soon as I heard that Gil had met Steve Jobs, I knew it was over. Because Steve Jobs has the ability to weave a homoerotic spell over older men. which he did, indeed. we all knew what was going to happen at Macworld in 1997, January 97. Anybody there? Gil comes out and gives the worst speech that was ever given. Someone had decided, he usually wore a blue suit and a tie, and someone said, you got to loosen up. And they put him in a, I guess you call it a Nehru shirt, collarless shirt with buttons. And he's kind of like me, he's kind of a chubby guy. And so it's comes out. And he has a terrible talk, lost track of the teleprompter and began to, and it was, we were all the Apple executives were sitting in the first few rows just kind of saying, oh God. And then at the end he says, oh, I have one more thing. I'd like to bring out my new strategic advisor, Steve Jobs. And Steve comes out in his classic black turtleneck jeans, very cool, and Gil's standing there, and here's Steve coming out and saying, hi. And we all could tell right then that this was not going to last very long. So Steve wound up taking over the company. And though I shouldn't speak ill of the dirty part, he was a difficult individual, but did a great job. And why do you do a great job? What did we learn from the experience of Apple's struggles? Was we had great technology. Steve did not introduce any new technology. Oh, let's use a mock kernel in BSD 4.3 Unix or whatever. But he had this marketing and design sense, and he had this focus. We were still trying to struggle to go after the enterprise computing and struggle with competing against Windows. He had this focus that said, screw the enterprise. The future is going to be consumers. Let's focus on consumers. Let's do great design. Let's make things elegant. Let's make it all work together. And Apple resurrected itself and became the most profitable company in the world. So learning from your mistakes, figuring out what didn't work, and figuring out how to correct it, is an absolutely critical talent that you have to have if you're in a large company or if you're doing a startup. In fact, probably more important to start because most startups do ziggy and zagging. So that's probably enough war stories. The venture capital industry, what can I say? VCs are difficult. Think about, what is your value proposition? Don't talk about the technology. A typical VC will say, I'm going to believe for now that you have great technology, but I want to really understand who's the customer, what's the market opportunity, what's your differential advantage, who are your people, and then the technology kind of follows. So don't lead with technology. OVP did 2 investments here in Boise, one unsuccessful and one that I hope is still successful. We invested in a company called M2E Power that I actually spun out of the Idaho National Lab. And it was cool technology in the lab. It was motion charging technology. So as you're walking, you're charging your devices, whatever. And it worked in the lab. When we began to actually build it into products, something called electromagnetic feedback came into play, and it didn't quite perform enough, so that company didn't actually work. We've also invested in Cradlepoint, which does 3G and 4G routers here in Boise, and we're still hoping that company's going to make it. They seem to be doing well. Really, if you want to get VC money, think about, what's the market, who's the customer, what's your value proposition, and really hone that really, really well. So I have no real deep advice about working with VCs, but I can answer questions. Anybody have any questions? Yeah. You have to shout pretty loud.
Is it what was the failure moment when you realized that yes, you could learn and move forward, that you could embrace failure? At Apple? Well, and in your life, what turned the corner for you?
I think Apple was well, I had several failures in my life. I left Apple to take over as the CTO at Borland Software. Anybody here remember Borland?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So Borland was once the third largest software company on the planet, and Del Yoakum had gone there from Apple. Myself and John Poison went there from Apple, and we again had great technology.